The emergency meeting of world leaders stretched into its third hour. The large conference room in Geneva buzzed with tension as presidents, prime ministers, and military commanders argued about how to respond to the aliens who had suddenly appeared in their midst. "We should be focusing on defending Earth, not sending our people into space to fight someone else's war," shouted the Russian president, slamming his fist on the table. "And how exactly do you propose we defend against beings that can drain a sun in a day?" asked the British Prime Minister, her voice cold with logic. "Our most powerful weapons would be like throwing stones at a hurricane." Dr. Kim Ji-hai sat quietly at the back of the room, listening to the politicians' debate. As South Korea's leading quantum physicist, she had been called in to consult, but so far no one had asked for her opinion. Her mind kept returning to the data. The aliens, the Confederation representatives, had shared about the Void Harbingers. The Chinese president was speaking now. "These aliens come here with tales of doom, asking for our help, when they have technology thousands of years beyond ours. Why should we believe them?" Ambassador Park, the Confederation diplomat, stood calmly at the front of the room. Unlike the other aliens in his delegation, who had blue skin or forearms or other strange features, Park looked almost human. His species had been chosen for first contact precisely because of this similarity. "We understand your suspicion," Park said. "In your position, I would feel the same, but the threat is real. The Harbingers have already destroyed 17 advanced civilizations, and they are coming this way. If they're so dangerous, why did you lead them here?" demanded the Indian Prime Minister. "We did not," Park began, but was interrupted by the sound of phones and tablets buzzing throughout the room. The American president looked at her device, face paling. "Mars Colony 1 has gone dark. All communication lost." Screens around the room switched to satellite feeds showing Mars. A dark, cloud-like entity hovered above the red planet, tendrils of black energy, reaching down to the surface where the human colony had been established. "What is that?" someone whispered. "A Harbinger scout," Park said grimly. "We were followed, I am sorry." The room exploded into chaos. Dr. Kim slipped out, needing space to think. In the hallway, she found a quiet corner and pulled out her tablet, reviewing the Confederation data again. Something about the Harbinger's energy signature seemed familiar. 2 hours later, she was called back into the meeting. The mood had shifted dramatically. With the destruction of Mars Colony 1 and the deaths of 2,000 colonists, the threat had become real. The Harbingers were no longer a theoretical danger. "Dr. Kim," said the South Korean president, "you've reviewed the alien data. Do you have any insights?" She stood, suddenly the focus of the world's most powerful people. "Yes, the Harbingers. Energy absorption method is similar to a theoretical system I've been developing, a quantum entanglement field that can transfer energy across vast distances. But mine was designed for clean power generation. They've weaponized the concept." Ambassador Park looked at her with surprise. "Your species has been theorizing about quantum entanglement fields. This is typically technology that develops after telepathic abilities emerge." "Humans don't have telepathic abilities," the British Prime Minister pointed out. "Exactly," said Park, "and that's what makes you unique and potentially our salvation. Every other advanced species in the Confederation evolved telepathic centers in their brains. It's as common as developing eyes or ears. We assumed it was necessary for higher intelligence." He brought up a holographic display showing different alien brain structures than a human brain. "Your minds are completely isolated from each other. You cannot directly share thoughts or emotions. What we considered a primitive limitation may be your greatest strength." Dr. Kim's mind was racing. "The Harbinger's attack method, it targets the telepathic centers, doesn't it? It uses them as a gateway." Park nodded. "Yes, they turn our own connected consciousness against us. But your minds, they have no way in. You're naturally shielded." "So what exactly are you proposing?" asked the American president. "We need to study how your brains resist the Harbinger influence," Park explained. "Our scientists believe we can create defensive technology based on this resistance, but we need human volunteers." "You want us to send our people out there to fight in a galactic war when we've barely reached Mars?" The Brazilian president shook her head in disbelief. Before anyone could respond, new alerts sounded. The screen showed the Harbinger scout ship leaving Mars, heading directly toward Earth. "How long do we have?" asked the Chinese president, suddenly businesslike. "At its current speed, 3 days," replied a military advisor. The room fell silent. Finally, the American president spoke. "We don't have a choice anymore, do we? If these Harbingers can destroy advanced alien civilizations, Earth wouldn't stand a chance alone." One by one, the world leaders nodded in agreement. Not from altruism or desire to help the galaxy, but from the most basic human instinct: survival. The next day, recruitment centers opened worldwide. The call went out for volunteers to join the first human space defense force. Despite the fear and uncertainty, people lined up by the thousands: scientists, soldiers, engineers, all willing to take the fight to the stars. Dr. Kim worked around the clock with the Confederation scientists, adapting her quantum entanglement theories to create a defensive system. She had never imagined her research would be used for war, but as she told her assistant, better to fight in space than wait for them to come here. Training facilities were established using Confederation technology to prepare humans for space combat. The learning curve was steep. Humans had to absorb centuries of technological advancement in days. "Your species adapts quickly," observed Officer Kang, a Confederation military trainer, as she watched human pilots master alien flight systems. "Most species would take months to learn these controls." "We've been preparing for alien invasions in movies for a century," joked a pilot. "Just never thought we'd be the ones doing the invading." 1 week after first contact, the 1st Battalion of Human Defenders was ready to depart. 5,000 volunteers boarded Confederation ships, leaving Earth behind. Dr. Kim stood at the Deaton launch facility, watching the massive vessels rise silently into the sky. She would follow soon with her research team, but this first wave consisted primarily of military personnel. Ambassador Park stood beside her. "They are very brave," he said quietly. "They're terrified," Dr. Kim replied, "but humans have always been good at functioning despite fear. Sometimes because of it." "The Confederation has forgotten how to be afraid," Park admitted. "Perhaps that's part of our problem." As the ships disappeared into the clouds, Dr. Kim couldn't help but wonder what humanity was getting itself into. They were reluctant warriors in a war not of their making, fighting an enemy they barely understood, alongside aliens they weren't sure they could trust. But the alternative was extinction. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was surviving against the odds. The massive laboratory aboard the Confederation flagship buzzed with activity. Human and alien scientists worked side by side, surrounded by equipment that would have seemed like magic to Earth just weeks ago. Dr. Kim moved between workstations, checking readings and offering suggestions. Her quantum entanglement theories had become the foundation of their defense strategy. "The neural pattern amplifier is ready for testing," announced Dr. Han, her chief assistant. He gestured to a helmet-like device on a nearby table. "Good," said Dr. Kim. "Now we need a volunteer." A Confederation scientist named Nexil looked confused. "Why not use your own neural pattern? You designed the device." Dr. Kim shook her head. "Every human brain is slightly different. We need to test multiple patterns to find the most effective shield frequency." This concept seemed to trouble the alien scientists. Most telepathic species shared nearly identical neural structures. Individuality was a physical reality for humans in ways the Confederation species couldn't fully grasp. 3 decks below, Commander Lee Jun-ho was having similar cultural difficulties. The veteran of South Korea's Special Forces now found himself trying to explain basic military strategy to beings with technology centuries beyond Earth's, yet who seemed to lack fundamental tactical concepts. "You're saying you've never used deception in warfare?" Lee asked the Confederation Military Council. "Never?" Admiral Traz, the blue-skinned commander of the Confederation fleet, blinked his 4 eyes in sequence, their equivalent of a head shake. "Telepathic species cannot effectively lie to each other. Our combat has always been direct, the application of superior force or technology." Lee exchanged glances with the other human officers in the room. For species that could read each other's thoughts, deception would indeed be impossible. But against the Harbingers, The Harbingers anticipate your movements because they've learned. Your patterns, Lee explained. You always take the most logical, direct approach, but humans rarely do what's most logical. He activated a holographic display showing various battle scenarios. We need to be unpredictable. Feints, diversions, traps, these are standard human tactics. The alien commanders looked skeptical, but with 17 civilizations already lost, they were desperate enough to try anything. 2 days later, the combined human Confederation fleet approached the Arcturus system, where 3 Harbinger vessels had been detected feeding on the energy of a dying star. This would be humanity's first real combat in space. Captain Choi Mina sat in the command chair of the Defiance, a Confederation frigate now crewed primarily by humans. Though small by Confederation standards, the ship was still larger than any vessel humans had ever built. Its weapon systems had been modified based on Dr. Kim's research to emit quantum fields that disrupted the Harbinger's energy absorption. "All hands to battle stations," Choi ordered, her voice calm despite the fear churning in her stomach. The crew, a mix of humans and Confederation species, moved with practiced efficiency. "Enemy vessels detected," reported the sensor officer. "They've noticed us." On the main screen, the Harbinger ships looked like swirling vortices of dark energy, beautiful and terrifying. "Admiral Traz is ordering all ships to form attack formation Delta," said the communications officer. Captain Choi took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. "Send confirmation, but prepare to execute Operation Chaos instead." Operation Chaos was Commander Lee's brainchild, a strategy so illogical and seemingly self-destructive that no telepathic species would ever consider it. The Defiance, along with 5 other human-crewed ships, would break formation and launch what appeared to be a suicidal attack on the largest Harbinger vessel, while seeming to abandon the rest of the fleet. "Executing in 3, 2, 1, break formation," Choi ordered. The Defiance veered sharply away from the fleet, followed by the other human ships. On the command channel, Admiral Traz was shouting about discipline and following orders, but Choi had been authorized by the High Council to ignore him. "Full power to engines," she commanded. "Let's make them think we're running." The 6 human ships accelerated away from the main fleet, then abruptly changed course, heading directly toward the largest Harbinger vessel. "They're turning to face us," reported the tactical officer. "The other Harbingers are maintaining position." This was exactly what Commander Lee had predicted. The Harbingers, like the Confederation species, expected logical behavior. A small group breaking away must be fleeing. When that group suddenly attacked, the Harbingers would assume they had special weapons or shields. Why else would they attack? "Alone? Launch disruptor probes," Choi ordered. Dozens of small devices shot from the human ships surrounding the Harbinger vessel. Each emitted a fraction of Dr. Kim's quantum shield, not enough to harm the Harbinger, but enough to distract. Meanwhile, the main Confederation fleet, led by Admiral Traz, was executing the real attack. While the Harbingers focused on the seemingly chaotic human assault, the Confederation ships moved into position behind the 2 smaller Harbinger vessels. "Probes at full power," reported the tactical officer. "The Harbinger is attempting to absorb them." "Commence erratic maneuvers," Choi ordered. The Defiance began to move in an unpredictable pattern, tumbling and spinning in ways that made no tactical sense. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Traz watched with a mixture of confusion and grudging admiration. The human ships moved chaotically, like insects swarming a predator. It looked like madness, yet it was working. The largest Harbinger vessel was completely focused on the bizarre threat, ignoring the main fleet. "All ships, fire on the secondary targets," Traz commanded. The combined firepower of 30 Confederation warships, enhanced with Dr. Kim's quantum disruptors, struck the 2 smaller Harbinger vessels simultaneously. For the first time since the war began, the Harbingers seemed vulnerable. Their energy-absorbing abilities faltered against the human-designed weapons. One of the smaller Harbingers collapsed in on itself, its dark energy dispersing into space. The Confederation crews cheered, their first victory against an enemy that had seemed invincible. The largest Harbinger, realizing the deception, turned to aid its companion, but it was too late. The remaining smaller vessel was critically damaged. The human ships regrouped and rejoined the main fleet, allowing the combined force to focus on the mothership. The battle lasted another 3 hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. When the final Harbinger vessel dissipated into nothingness, a stunned silence fell across the Confederation fleet, followed by jubilant celebration. In the aftermath, Captain Choi found herself summoned to Admiral Traz's flagship. She expected a reprimand for disobeying initial orders, despite their victory. Instead, she found Commander Lee and Dr. Kim already there, along with the highest-ranking Confederation officers. "Your tactics were incomprehensible," Admiral Traz said to Commander Lee. "No logical being would sacrifice ships as a diversion." "We didn't sacrifice anyone," Lee pointed out. "The ships were never in serious danger. We just made it look that way." "Deception," said a Confederation general, testing the unfamiliar concept. "Acting against logic to confuse the enemy." "Humans call it thinking outside the box," Dr. Kim added. "Our lack of telepathy forced us to develop creative problem-solving. What you see as our primitive minds might be our greatest strength." The Confederation leaders looked at the 3 humans with new respect. After losing 17 civilizations and countless battles they had finally won, not through superior technology or numbers, but through the unpredictable, irrational creativity of the human mind. Word of the victory spread quickly through the fleet and back to Earth. For the first time since the Harbingers appeared, there was hope. The Confederation had been fighting a logical, predictable war against an enemy that could anticipate their every move. But humans were anything but predictable. As Captain Choi returned to the Defiance, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. Humanity had always feared that alien contact would reveal how primitive and backward they were. Instead, their very primitiveness, their isolated minds, their capacity for deception, their illogical thinking might be exactly what the galaxy needed to survive. The emergency alert klaxons blared throughout the Confederation Command Center as Admiral Song Tae-woo studied the tactical hologram with growing concern. The massive display showed a fleet of Harbinger vessels, at least 30 of them, moving through Confederation space in a direct line toward Earth. "They've figured out where we came from," he said grimly to his staff. "The Harbingers are adapting." 3 months had passed since humanity's first victory at Arcturus. In that time, human tactics had led to 6 more successful engagements against the enemy. The Harbingers, previously thought unstoppable, had been forced to retreat from key systems. But now they were changing strategy, going directly for humanity's homeworld. "How long until they reach Earth?" asked Colonel Wu, Song's human tactical officer. "At their current speed, 5 days," replied a Confederation analyst. Song's face remained impassive, but his mind raced. Earth had minimal defenses compared to Confederation worlds. Its nearly 8 billion inhabitants were sitting ducks. "Contact Earth Command," he ordered. "Tell them to begin evacuation immediately." Colonel Wu looked shocked. "Evacuate Earth? To where?" "To everywhere," Song said. "The Harbingers want to eliminate humanity because we're their only real threat. We need to make sure they can never find all of us." Within hours, the largest evacuation in human history began. Confederation ships, Earth vessels, and hastily converted cargo haulers ferried people off-planet. Priority was given to military personnel, scientists, engineers, and their families, those most essential to continuing the fight. But contrary to historical precedent, nations worked together to ensure all regions of Earth were represented in the evacuation. "If Earth falls, humanity survives," became the rallying cry. It wasn't about saving individuals anymore, but preserving the species and its unique abilities. Meanwhile, Admiral Song met with the Confederation High Council to propose a radical, new approach to the war. "Conventional fleet tactics aren't working fast enough," he explained to the assembled alien leaders. "The Harbingers are learning to counter our deception strategies. We need to change our entire approach to warfare." He activated a holographic display showing historical Earth conflicts. "Throughout our history, when a smaller force faced a more powerful enemy, we developed asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, sabotage, hit-and-run attacks. We need to stop thinking of this as a war of fleets and start treating it as an insurgency. The Council members looked uncertain. Their civilizations had evolved beyond such primitive warfare millennia ago. "You're suggesting we abandon honorable combat?" asked one council member. "I'm suggesting we abandon dead combat," Song replied bluntly. "Honor won't matter if we're all destroyed. The Harbingers don't care about your battlefield traditions." After heated debate, the council reluctantly approved Song's plan. Human military advisors were dispatched throughout the Confederation fleet to implement what became known as the Earth Doctrine. In her lab aboard the Confederation science vessel Seeker, Dr. Kim watched as her team prepared the latest version of her quantum disruptor for testing. The earlier versions had helped win battles, but this new device was different, smaller, more focused, and far more powerful. "Power levels stable," reported her assistant, Dr. Huang. "Ready for test phase, Doctor." Kim nodded. "Activate the containment field." In the center of the lab, a small sample of Harbinger energy, captured during a previous battle, floated inside a specialized containment unit. The room dimmed as the new disruptor powered up, emitting a focused beam of quantum energy. When it struck the Harbinger sample, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The swirling dark energy froze in place, then began to break apart into smaller fragments. "It's working!" Dr. Huang exclaimed. "The quantum field is disrupting their cohesion." Dr. Kim allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. "More importantly, it's severing their connection to their collective consciousness. This isn't just a weapon, it's like cutting off their ability to think." Within days, production of the new disruptors began at facilities throughout Confederation space. Unlike previous weapons, these didn't try to destroy the Harbingers directly. They isolated them, cutting off each vessel from the hive mind that guided them. Admiral Song wasted no time implementing the new technology into his Earth Doctrine strategies. Small, fast attack ships crewed primarily by humans began striking at Harbinger forces, using the disruptors to isolate individual vessels before larger Confederation ships moved in for the kill. "We're not trying to win fair fights," Song explained to his officers. "We're making sure the fights aren't fair to begin with." As the Harbinger fleet approached Earth, they encountered not a defensive line of ships, but a series of traps, ambushes, and hit-and-run attacks. Confederacy ships hidden in asteroid fields would emerge, fire disruptors, and vanish before the Harbingers could respond. Abandoned freighters that appeared to be civilian evacuation vessels turned out to be packed with explosives. Decoy transmissions led Harbinger scouts into minefields. Some Confederation officers found these tactics distasteful, but none could argue with the results. The Harbinger advance slowed, then stopped, as more and more of their vessels were isolated and destroyed. The Harbinger's attack on Earth itself was their most desperate move yet. 3 massive motherships, each larger than any previously encountered, pushed through the defenses and entered Earth's atmosphere. In orbit, Admiral Song watched grimly as the enormous vessels descended toward the planet's surface. Most of Earth's population had been evacuated, but billions still remained, with evacuation continuing around the clock. "They're targeting major population centers," reported his sensor officer. Beijing, New York, New Delhi. Song had anticipated this move. "Execute Operation Scorched Earth." Across the planet's surface, specially designed disruptor arrays activated simultaneously. Developed by Dr. Kim's team and placed at strategic locations worldwide, these massive devices generated a quantum field that enveloped the entire planet. The effect on the Harbinger ships was immediate. Cut off from their collective intelligence, the massive vessels lost cohesion, their energy forms becoming unstable. They tried to retreat to escape the disruption field, but it was too late. One by one, they collapsed in on themselves, their energy dispersing harmlessly into the upper atmosphere. For the humans watching from space stations and evacuation ships, it looked like beautiful dark fireworks spreading across the sky, the death throes of beings who had threatened to destroy everything. In the aftermath of what became known as the Battle of Earth, Admiral Song stood before the Confederation Council again. This time, there was no debate about his methods. The Harbingers have lost approximately 40% of their forces, he reported. More importantly, they've retreated from 3 galactic sectors. For the first time, they're on the defensive. And your recommendation? Asked the Council. Leader, we continue the campaign, no more waiting for them to attack. We hunt them down, isolate them with the disruptors, and eliminate them one by one. A Confederation admiral spoke up. Such a campaign would take years. It would not be the clean, decisive victory our people expect. It won't be clean, Song agreed, but it will be thorough. The Harbingers threatened our extinction. We need to make sure they never threaten anyone again. As the Council debated, Dr. Kim entered the chamber with exciting news. We've analyzed the energy patterns from the destroyed Harbinger motherships, she announced. We believe they're all connected to a central consciousness, what you might call their queen or brain. If we can locate and neutralize it, Admiral Song finished her thought, then the war ends all at once. The Council quickly approved the new objective. Locate the Harbinger central consciousness and deploy Dr. Kim's disruptors against it. Human ships, now integrated throughout the Confederation fleet, led the way as the campaign pushed deeper into space the Harbingers had claimed. The fighting was brutal and efficient, not the elegant, honorable combat the Confederation had once practiced, but the ruthless, determined warfare humans had perfected over centuries of conflict with themselves. And slowly, battle by battle, the tide of war turned. The massive view screen on the bridge of the Confederation flagship Invincible showed a sight few had ever witnessed. The swirling energies of the galactic core, where stars packed so densely they created a perpetual twilight of overlapping light. Here, at the heart of the galaxy, the final battle would be fought. General Yoon stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his weathered face showing no emotion despite the gravity of the moment. 3 years of brutal warfare had led to this. The remaining Harbinger forces, driven back system by system, had retreated to their central nexus at the core. "Status report," he ordered. Colonel Bay, his tactical officer, responded crisply. "All ships in position, sir. The Harbingers have gathered around what appears to be their central consciousness, that large energy formation at coordinates 227 by 394. On the screen, amid the stars and gas clouds, floated what looked like a massive, dark star, a swirling vortex of black energy, larger than any Harbinger vessel they had encountered before. Around it clustered the remaining enemy forces, forming a defensive perimeter. "And Dr. Kim's device?" asked Yoon. "Ready for deployment. She's standing by in engineering." Yoon nodded and opened a channel. "Dr. Kim, are you certain this will work? We'll only get one shot at this." In engineering, Dr. Kim stood beside what had become her life's work, a quantum isolation generator the size of a small shuttle. What had begun as theoretical research on Earth had evolved into the most powerful weapon ever created by human hands. "As certain as I can be, General," she replied. "The smaller versions disrupted individual Harbinger vessels. This should be powerful enough to sever the entire collective from its central consciousness." Yoon didn't need to ask what would happen if she was wrong. This was humanity's and the galaxy's last stand. The Harbingers had destroyed 23 civilizations. Earth itself remained largely evacuated, its population scattered among Confederation worlds. If they failed today, there would be nowhere left to run. "All ships assume attack formation," Yoon ordered. "Remember the plan. Our job is to create a corridor for the Invincible to approach the central consciousness. Everything depends on getting Dr. Kim's device within range." Across thousands of ships, Confederation vessels crewed by hundreds of species alongside human-designed craft, commanders acknowledged the order. 3 years of fighting together had forged an unprecedented unity. Launch. "Fighters," Yoon commanded. From the larger vessels streamed smaller craft, many piloted by humans. Their tactics had proven most effective against the Harbingers' swarm-like defensive formations. The battle began with a silent flash of energy weapons against the darkness of space. The Harbinger vessels moved to intercept, their familiar flowing. Patterns now predictable to the battle-hardened crews facing them. "They're responding exactly as expected," reported Colonel Bay, "opening a gap in Quadrant 3. On a secondary command ship, Admiral Song directed the feint maneuvers that had made the human-led forces so effective, Confederation vessels appeared to flee, drawing Harbinger forces away from their defensive positions, only to turn and strike from unexpected angles. 3 hours into the battle, the moment Yoon had been waiting for arrived. A temporary corridor opened in the Harbinger defenses, leading directly to the central consciousness. "Full power to engines," he ordered. "All guns, provide covering fire. Get us as close as possible to the target." The Invincible surged forward, taking hit after hit as it plowed through the remaining Harbinger vessels. Shield warnings blared across the bridge as sections of the massive ship began to lose power. "Hull breach on decks 12 through 15, reported a damage control officer. "Emergency containment holding. Range to target?" Yoon asked, his voice calm despite the chaos. 8,000 kilometers, replied Colonel Bay. 7,000. 6. "We need to get closer," came Dr. Kim's voice. Over the comm. "The device won't be effective beyond 5,000 kilometers. A massive impact rocked the ship, throwing crew members to the floor. Main lighting failed, replaced by the red glow of emergency systems. "Engine 3 is down," reported the engineering officer. "We're losing speed." Yoon made a quick decision. "Divert all power from weapons to engines and shields. We're not stopping." The Invincible pushed forward, now taking hits without returning fire. At exactly 5,000 kilometers from the Harbinger central consciousness, Yoon gave the order. Everyone had waited 3 years to hear. Dr. Kim now. In engineering, Dr. Kim activated the quantum isolation generator. The device hummed to life, drawing enormous power from the ship's straining reactors. A beam of focused quantum energy, invisible to the naked eye, but registering on every sensor, lanced out toward the dark vortex at the center of the Harbinger forces. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the central consciousness began to change. The smooth, flowing motion of its energy became erratic. The smaller Harbinger vessels surrounding it froze in space, their own energy patterns disrupting. "It's working," Dr. Kim whispered, watching the readings on her console. "The quantum field is severing their connection." On the bridge, Yoon and his officers watched in awe as the massive dark vortex began to break apart. Without the unifying consciousness binding them together, the individual energy patterns that made up the Harbingers began to dissipate. "All ships, hold position," Yoon ordered. "Continue defensive operations, but do not approach the central mass." Over the next hour, they witnessed the end of a threat that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization. The central consciousness collapsed in on itself, releasing a final burst of energy before fading completely. The remaining Harbinger vessels, cut off from their controlling intelligence, simply dissolved into harmless radiation. 3 days later, General Yoon stood before the assembled Confederation High Council to deliver his final report on the war. "The threat has been eliminated," he stated simply. Dr. Kim's analysis confirms that no trace of the Harbinger consciousness remains active anywhere in scanned space. The council chamber erupted in celebration, representatives of hundreds of species embracing, some weeping with relief. When order was finally restored, the council leader addressed Yoon. "Humanity has saved this galaxy," she said. "A species we once quarantined as too dangerous to join interstellar society. The irony is not lost on us." Yoon nodded acknowledgement. "We were dangerous. Perhaps we still are. But sometimes it takes darkness to fight darkness." In the months that followed, the galaxy began the long process of rebuilding. The war had destroyed entire star systems and left countless refugees. Earth itself began to be repopulated, though many humans chose to remain on the Confederation, worlds where they had found new homes. The Confederation military structure underwent a complete reorganization under what became known as the Yoon Doctrine. Rapid response forces, primarily led by human commanders, were stationed throughout the galaxy, ready to respond to any new threat. "The galaxy has enjoyed peace for so long that it forgot how to fight," Yoon explained at the doctrine's formal adoption. "We must never make that mistake again." But it wasn't just human military tactics that transformed Confederation society. Dr. Kim and other human scientists brought a fresh perspective to research and innovation. Human artists introduced concepts of individual expression, that fascinated telepathic species use to shared consciousness. Our isolation from each other, what your species saw as our greatest weakness, forced us to develop creativity, individuality, and resilience, Dr. Kim explained to a conference of Confederation scientists. These are gifts we can share with you now. Not all aspects of the integration were smooth. Some Confederation species feared humans, seeing them as unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Others romanticized them as noble savages. It would take generations for truly equal relationships to develop. 5 years after the end of the war, Admiral Song, now the human representative to the High Council, stood at a viewport on the rebuilt Confederation capital station, watching ships from hundreds of worlds come and go. Beside him stood Commander Park, the diplomat who had first broken Earth's quarantine. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Song asked. "When you first came to Earth?" Park shook his head. "I hoped to find an advantage against the Harbingers. I never expected to find the saviors of galactic civilization." "We're not saviors," Song replied. "We're survivors. Humans have always been good at that. Perhaps that's what the galaxy needed." "Most," Park observed, "the Confederation had forgotten about struggle, about fighting for survival. You reminded us." As they spoke, a memorial service was beginning in the Great Hall. Representatives from every world gathered to honor the billions lost during the Harbinger War and to celebrate those who had saved countless more. The ceremony concluded with words that would eventually be inscribed on monuments throughout Confederation space. The galaxy burned until Earth answered the call. It was a simple truth that acknowledged a complex reality. Humanity, with all its flaws and primitive ways, had brought something essential back to a galaxy that had forgotten it. The primal ferocity and will to survive that comes from being alone in your own mind, forced to fight your own battles. The stars grew quiet again, but they would never forget the lesson Earth had taught them.